Okie doke. So it's core lecture 3, natural resource demand and Solo's mechanisms. And before we get started, I'm gonna do we'll have a quick look at where we've got to so far. So, intro lecture. Let's see. A couple of key graphs. We have this one. So what's going on here? We've basically got a log scale and we've got time here and we've got GDP and resource use. They're growing together. Okay? And of course, those of you who follow like ecological economics and so on will know there's a big debate about decoupling. So these are like coupled together, and how can we decouple them so that R turns down, whereas Y maybe keeps growing? Or maybe we need them both. If they are intrinsically coupled, then we would need them both to turn down, right? Because clearly R can't keep growing forever. So that's one key graph. Next key graph is that this one, for certain pollutants in specific times and places, we see this trend, right? Again, we have Y, and then for the pollutant, we might have something like this. Okay, let's call this P, the pollutant flow. So what is going on there? It seems like, God, this looks absolutely terrible. The pollutant is just growing and growing. We're all going to choke to death or whatever. But then suddenly, whack, it goes down really steeply. I've shown here a couple of examples. There are lots more. But of course, there are also examples where the pollutant is still tracking GDP. A good example is, of course, carbon dioxide globally and in many countries of the world, individual countries, not in Sweden. There, carbon dioxide is more level, if not declining slightly. I'm not sure what the latest data says. But globally, it's still going up. So then the question is, can we do this for carbon dioxide as well? Or do we need Y to turn down? And if we can do it for carbon dioxide, what are the right policies and so on? So these are kind of key questions for the course. So that's from the intro. Then the first lecture, economic growth, what do we do there? Well, we said, look, it's all about technological change. Technological progress drives growth, an increase in labor productivity. But what about the increase in resource productivity? Shouldn't resource productivity also go up, in which case we could get decoupling? And shouldn't we be able to produce more stuff with the same amount or less pollution? Okie doke. And of course we looked at the Solow model, very simple, Ramsey, so on. And we looked at how we can, in Solow, we said, look, Solow shows that the key is technological progress, but we just treat it as exogenous. And we had a quick look at how you can endogenize technological progress, but we didn't really go through the details. What Solow puts at the center of the model is capital, but he kind of shows that actually capital just isn't that important in the long run. Capital growth just tracks growth in productivity, which Solow treats as exogenous. If there's no growth in productivity, capital goes to a constant level. So capital isn't the key to growth, technological progress is the key to growth. Which is sort of good news, potentially for the environment, because if technological progress is behind the growth we see, shouldn't it also be able to bring down the need for resources and bring down the need for polluting emissions? The next one we added to the Solo model, so yeah, this is Solo, exogenous labor supply, production, consumption, saving, and the capital input. So this is capital input, labor input, production, which is a function of these two, and then this product we divide between these. And in Solo we have, of course, S, Y, and 1 minus S. Why? In the 70s, people started getting worried about resources running out. So Dasgupta, Heel, Solo, and Stiglitz, they came up with a model where we have a limited resource stock, and we can decide, or the market can decide potentially when to use it, and it's free to extract. It's just a case. It's like what we can call a cake eating problem. We've got these resources sitting there, it's like, when do we use them? And in DHSS, sorry, in Solo we have Y is, how can I do this? ALL to the 1 minus alpha K to the alpha, but in DHSS we add the need for resources to the beta, and we go there. And an important point is, with this Cobb-Douglas production function, these exponents are the shares of the inputs. So capital takes a share alpha, resources take a share beta. Probably by the time you've hearing this video, we'll have talked about this in class, but well, what is something you could think about? If not, what is a reasonable value for alpha, and what is a reasonable value for beta, and what does that value of beta imply about the importance of natural resources? Well, we'll come to that. But basically, we showed that this version of the DHSS model, staying with like their baseline version, there was no technological progress, and the predictions of it just don't fit reality. According to this, the rate of use of R should be declining steeply, the price of R should be increasing steeply. This is not what we see. But if we add technological progress to this, again exogenous like in Solo, then we can get predictions that match the data, basically this, and what we add to it, which is nice, is the price of the resource, which is this. Okay, if we have this model, sorry, not this model, if we take this model, but we say extraction is costly, we need to send some inputs. This Y, we divide it 3 ways between consumption, we can wipe these, we have consumption, savings, and intermediate input production. And this X goes into extracting the resource, which then turns into R. In this version of the model, with exogenous technological progress, we basically get this, which is great because it fits the data, but the bad news is, it's like, okay, but what happens when this starts running out? Because in the version which fits this, we have to say, oh, the resource stocks are absolutely huge, they're nowhere near running out, so the scarcity rent is 0. But we then need to say, okay, but what happens if it actually does start running out in the long run? And then we need a more sophisticated model, which we went through, and we can show that actually, if we do have a very large but not infinite stock, early on we'll have this kind of behavior, but later y will be dragged down a bit, r will level off and then go down, and wr will start rising and then eventually rise steeply, just as in the DHSS baseline model. Okay, so that's where we got to, but then we sort of said, that's all fine, but really, can we just assume this Cobb-Douglas function? Where is that coming from? We want to unpack it, and we want to look at Solo's mechanisms, which we mentioned. For instance, one of Solo's mechanisms was we develop resource-efficient technology. But given this production function, there's no real way to model that. We need a different production function. Another of Solo's mechanisms was we can shift the composition of our consumption and production between different goods, but in this model there's only one good. And the third mechanism was we can shift between alternative resource inputs, but in this model there's only one resource input. So clearly we need to change this production function to capture these ideas of directed technological change in resource efficiency, shifts between resource inputs, and shifts between different products. And that's what core lecture 3 is all about. So that's the intro to core lecture 3, and I'm going to stop this recording there.